Bitcoiners.
There he is.
Oh, let me
How's
put
it
my
going,
volume
Nolan?
up.
I have some FOMO right now. I don't have a Satoshi Nakamoto hat.
Yeah, I was gonna
Oh,
say,
yeah,
cool
man.
hat, man.
Get in the club, man.
Oh, Nolan. All right. So Alex and I find ourselves on opposite ends of the spectrum.
Are we gonna go back to the AI argument?
Oh, I wasn't. I was.
No one's on my
I was-
side, so we got
I
to bring
was-
that back up.
I was trying to figure out how to respectfully frame you as a pro-status, pro-warmongering.
What? Why do I get that label?
All I know is McShane has somehow become more statist ever since he stopped working with me. So I think there's a direct correlation to the amount that we work together and how pro-state you become.
Could be. What's my state affiliation here?
No. I was talking about McShane. Nolan, you are pure as.
What's mine?
No, you've become statist. McShane has become statist. Nolan
I don't
still
know
is
about
pure
that.
as
Yeah,
I don't see it.
this
I
is
don't
news
see
to
it.
me, man.
I don't see it, Q.
Yeah.
All right. Let's. No. Essentially, we've been talking about the announcement that the Treasury Department is potentially going after crypto mixers at large.
Yeah, I saw that news. Yeah.
And in a conversation that I had with Jason Brett, he essentially made me aware that, hey, this doesn't need to go through the normal legal channels because they're pushing this through under the guise of wartime necessity and the Patriot Act. They are going to have the right to just push this through without proper legal channels. I think we all, or at least Alex and I, are in agreement that this is a very dangerous thing for Bitcoin at large, but I'd love your thoughts on this as it goes towards government overreach and just the wartime propaganda being pushed forward, because last I checked, US soldiers are not actually fighting.
I mean, I think it's one of the lessons I took from COVID in the early days was I wouldn't get mad, and that I also removed myself from any spell of having to follow any rules, let's say. Like, I thought immediately it was sort of my job to scam back, like falsifying tests, all that stuff, all the ID nonsense. So it was like, okay, I don't owe them anything. I'm not under their spell. And that's something that sort of continued throughout and after COVID. So we're not in an environment where these people there's no legitimacy anymore, even to the point of financial regulation. Like, there was a time at which I was like, okay, maybe SEC and we're going to all learn together and it's going to be great. But watching the actual corruption live and in 4K HD, like we've seen, there is no mandate anymore. Whenever I hear Jerome Powell, for example, say things like, there's no worry about de-dollarization as long as America remains rules-based, rule of law and all that. I see a hostage. I see someone who's like got a legal mind who can't really say what they think, but is coming right out and saying what we all believe now, that this is an illegitimate government and a system that's on its last legs. So, it doesn't surprise me. It's like, get used to it. We're never going to get treated right. We're going to be hunted. Forget about this. Like, it's going to be so easy to just associate Bitcoiners with Hamas or Russia, or Putin, or, like, it's all that stuff. So
that's kind of what I wonder about. It's like, at what point do they turn up kind of these farcical kind of clown show regulations? They can't possibly enforce them broadly, which is kind of fun. But I do think Bitcoiners will be
but you say that as though they're not going to try to enforce them.
They will, but I just think that our attitudes and opinions and history of kind of fighting back at these things will make us stick out. You know what I mean? There's a point where it's like it's going to be tough times for Bitcoiners in the United States. I don't know where
we'll see.
They can go to insulate themselves.
Yeah, but state capacity, I think, is what the question comes down to. And I think the United States is not looking at what's going on with the rest of the world, who looks like they're serious about basically, how would you put it, decoupling with America. right? Like that's what's happening right now.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
we're
Yeah.
experiencing the greatest bond failure in American history, as Meester tweeted out today. A whole thread that I read on my show earlier. You've got China looking like it's divesting of almost any connection. I don't think this is done out of like, oh, we hate America, it's our turn. I think it's just like, shit, like we can't let this good deal continue. 1 second.
Yeah, I think we'll find ourselves increasingly like politically ostracized from the quote unquote international community.
Yeah,
Like
they've
20
all got
odd
their own.
countries.
They've got their own trouble, so I don't think much is going to work out for them, right? But this is at least like, why beyond all their own problems do they also have to deal with American psychological manipulation and involving themselves in our own domestic psyop activities, which is what's happening, right? Like Russia got bound up to the Trump thing, like like they don't want to be involved in that shit, right? And here they are, like front and center. They haven't stopped being involved in collateral damage around psyops run against Donald Trump. So,
so one thing that worries me is that I don't know, the halvening coming up, the ETF approval. If we do get some runaway price action, it's going to be a lot harder and kind of discouraging to the average American to stack. I mean, they still benefit from all the virtues of Bitcoin, even the price appreciation, but the scale might not be enough to push them into this totally like sovereign, I'm going to play jurisdictional arbitrage, I'm willing to walk away from this country level.
Yeah, we're in the part of the game now when the rich people join sides based on Bitcoin and the other thing. So you're going to see it with energy companies, and you're going to see it with the likes of BlackRock. Like they just want to make a buck, right? Part of the game theory was always that they would push,
right,
drawn in.
They can just collect fees all the way up.
This thing was never going to be just plebs hodling until we had like democratic numbers or something like that. There was which had to break at a different level.
Right. So what does life look like for those kind of left behind? Because I mean, you could think about it as like basically a percentage of their net worth and their actions are going to be captured, which is going to influence their behavior a lot. If they're only holding tiny amounts of Bitcoin, non-mixed, KYC, probably kept on a platform. I mean, it's just feels very far from this sort of somewhat libertarian, self-sovereign ideal that we've kind of put in our collective imagination.
I mean, there's still going to be a network of Bitcoiners, like we see in the comments about Citadel building. I still believe the number one industry, like as bleak as things look, one of the things that I think Bitcoiners have as a blind spot, and I've said it a few times, is it's infinity over 21 million. There still is a world of abundance that we can create. Now the potential for that is starting to get limited, right? Like things are looking like there is a downside that's a lot darker. But I'm encouraged. Look at Saudi Arabia, right? If everything here in the Middle East turns into Saudi Arabia actually gets nuclear energy, there's a way that the whole thing in Gaza works out where it is Saudi that becomes stewards of the community services in that part of the world because they've become a nuclear energy power. America has been unwilling to share a lot of nuclear power with that part of the world for whatever reason, right? We understand the reasons. They don't want nuclear proliferation and things like that. But I think it's going to happen anyway. There's no way to stop it now. Once you start seeing like the Nome, that line city, whether that works or not, who knows? But Trump, who's looking more and more like he's going to be the president, he's been talking about the 10 freedom cities that he's going to build in America, which will be sort of cities out of a box, right? Which will totally rethink our ideas around civil engineering and things like that. You got Bukele with the Bitcoin city. This is the sleeper business that no one sees coming that is actually going to dominate the economy in the 2030s. It's going to be
tax-free jurisdictions.
Just brand new
special
cities,
autonomous zones. Yeah.
Well, I mean, city state-ish type stuff, like just a rethinking. Like I used to think we would rebuild New York City. I'm not sure we will anymore.
I think we're also going to see this. I mean, it probably won't affect anything on too large of a scale, but I am seeing just anecdotally more and more people build citadels of communities of Bitcoiners. They're getting together in small groups and they're starting entire towns all over the world. It's insane.
I think that's going to continue. I think it's going to scale too in a crazy way. So when you're talking about this thing about Bitcoiners, like one way to imagine it, when you say it's a bleak life if you don't have a lot or whatever, you can imagine that the Bitcoin liquidity within a city might have a lot to do with the attractiveness and interest people have in that city. It's the whole.
That's a good point. The collective hodl.
So you're going to see that. I predicted that in my science fiction story, Satoshi Wedding Murders, that's what a Satoshi wedding basically is these huge hodling families that would join fortunes, thereby increasing the overall.
It's like the Yap Stones. It's like they're transferring.
Yeah. So all these people sort of come together and in the same way that royalty in the democratic or public world held laws and confidence for people, there is in this future state Bitcoiners who keep liquidity, because in a time for Bitcoin market, it doesn't mean that everyone is. It doesn't mean you can still have infinite amount of things built, right? You still have this sort of time spent on things, and you could have a really simple marketplace.
Well, I mean, that seems a very optimistic vision, exciting, because there's not a lot of cohesiveness. Like the United States is so large, and so that it's like many small countries of people, so diverse in its opinions. It's just you don't feel that community.
Let me read. Someone's been showing this map around, and I want to read it to you guys.
Oh yeah,
it was going around Twitter this morning, or X, and it's the map if you wanted to invade America, like what you would name every zone.
Oh yes, I've seen this.
So New England is people who wear shorts in winter.
Yep.
And it's New York City, gangs.
The Cowboys in Texas.
Yeah, then Dixie is backwoods people who still know the old ways. Not going there either. Then you got rednecks, swamp hunters, Florida man contractors,
Joe Exotic,
impossible corn maze full of armed farmers. That's your old Iowa.
That's hilarious.
Impossible corn maze full of armed farmers.
The Alaska one also is my favorite. Even the liberals have guns.
Yeah. There's only one part. It's Oregon and Northern California. We're like, well, this part wouldn't be that tough.
This is walk-in.
SoCal.
Flag. You've basically conquered California.
Just hang on though. No. You can't conquer all of California because SoCal, it's all gangs. So you can have Northern California.
All gangs. You're dead meat there. That's
you can't come to SoCal. You couldn't walk a block in my hood.
No. You're dead.
In your hood.
In my hood.
Well, Q, in your hood. Yeah.
So, but
if I could get the password for the gate, I would probably be able to walk a block in your hood.
So the thing is, in the United States, it's still what Abraham Lincoln said. Like the whole world of geopolitics is still just a sport to North America because of this reality, right? No one will ever take a free breath from the Mississippi, a free drink from the Mississippi River in their life. It's not going to, unless they're American, right? There will be no foreign person drinking freely from the Mississippi River without fear of getting killed and attacked and whatever. So
or dying of some.
Yeah. It's now we've got a challenge ahead of us. We have to be deprogrammed from being consumer culture in some ways, right? Like that was always the game. The game very tacitly, very explicitly, was that the military industrial complex, the fiat infrastructure, would be supported by a brainwashing mechanism. And they came together. We were brainwashed into being consumers at the end of the Second World War in order to maintain battle readiness, so that you could take the commercial industrial machine and pivot it to war if you needed. So they set this thing going, but then the finances ended up giving us the worst of both worlds because we didn't keep the manufacturing base. The money came into question. And
we still have the capacity for all this debt and that mindset, but we don't build anything.
Yeah. So we got the worst of both worlds. So this is better for us. I think what the rest of the world is sort of betting on is that we'll suffer from our withdrawal from this thing, and I think that's true. I think that the more, like you're seeing it with the Middle East thing right now, people are sort of doubling down on their brainwashing. They're like, no, I can be crazier, like, because it's hard to acknowledge after all this time how heavy the brainwashing is. But that's the good news, because the truth is, everyone is already persuaded to blaming banks and money and all that. And that's going to be everyone's sort of cognitive out here, is that you were hypnotized by a fake money system that managed, fiat being what it is. It's word-based node propagation of a network. And the words have, completely become an extension of American military interests. So the brainwashing is perfect. It's absolutely pristine. We'll look back on it, and we will have a distance from it one day to say, fuck, they were good at this, man. Jesus Christ, they understood. Because here's how it works, right? Stage one is, we realized that there are, one group of people is totally brainwashed. Step two is we start to realize, actually the default setting is we are brainwashable. So who's orchestrating it? You can't avoid it. It's unavoidable, right? We do not have logic. We oscillate between our wants and our fears, and that's everything we decide based on overlapping wants and fears turns into a decision, which we use rationalization to make sense of. But when we call that intelligence, it's not. It's just stuff shoved on top. It's whipped cream. It's not real, right?
Right. Talk about the effects of this, though, in the Bitcoin community itself.
But that's the thing. In the end, once you start realizing that the hypnosis, the origins of the hypnosis, is the money itself, right? That it is actually that you can make money out of brainwashing, like that level of military grade technology. You start to realize that you need to just change the incentive structure to begin with. And that's why Bitcoin is the only thing that will allow you to actually get something closer to the proper feedback loop of cost, benefit, and understanding what's going on, and not just lie on top of lie. So we're getting close. It's tough. We're in the destruction phase. So lies are increasing, right?
Real quick, because we rarely ever get questions from the actual chat, but we actually literally got a question. It has nothing to do with necessarily with Bitcoin, but we've talked enough about this that I don't care anymore. I'm totally fine with us having this conversation. Israel Palestine, we're gonna do it. We're gonna have three Americans are gonna have this discussion right now. To AU 106's point, it really feels to me like there is a psyop of information that is coming through. And it's like the oldest playbook in wartime history. And I don't know. I feel like the three of us have spent enough time, not enough, but we spent some time looking at history and the way propaganda, especially not just in recent history, but deeper history, older wars that predate World War I even, and the way propaganda was used to sort of dictate mass opinion to justify what's going on. I mean, I have my own belief system and stance, but overall, I do think that there's an old playbook that I've noticed the US media follows, and there are four main stories that they always follow. And it just so happened to be the four horsemen of the apocalypse. There's always a story about famine. Oh, this homeless crisis here or there. Oh, people aren't eating. Oh, please donate to the homeless. They don't have enough food. Kids aren't eating. There's always a story about famine. There is always a story about natural disaster. Oh my God, this hurricane is going to hit Florida. It's a record. Oh, Hurricane Katrina, this is going to be the biggest. Oh, this tsunami in Japan is the biggest. There's always a natural disaster. There's also always some type of plague. COVID-19 was not the first. I still remember the days of mad cow disease or swine flu or bird flu, whatever they are. There's always one of these crazy plagues. And then, of course, the simplest and easiest one to always pull on, man fighting man. And of course, what better place to portray the man fighting man for the potential end of the world than the place the Bible says it will happen. Like, those are the 4 stories Western media always pushes through. Why? Because the majority of its audience is a Bible loving, believing Christian who is afraid of these 4 horsemen. And because they've now stoked fear in you, you're going to come back and keep watching.
But Q, remember what I just said, right? You got to understand brainwashing is the default. So even Gaza, like, this is a place that was created to be a mind virus. Like, it is a mind. What they have is exactly like COVID. Like, you can't go near these people. Like,
In
like
collusion
America,
with
like,
Israel and the United States. It was curated environment to always be unstable.
Absolutely. But there was complicit activity in the Middle East as well, obviously. Like, we don't have to look for heroes and villains here. This is something people wanted. They created an actual incubation center for a mind virus to propagate, and they unleash it when it needs to be unleashed. It's exactly the same that's going on in America. It's the victimhood mentality. It's the same old, hey, they have your stuff. Go get it. It's yours.
Hey, you need reparations.
Hey,
Hey,
they have your stuff.
Yeah.
This
Right?
is
So it's always been to distract people from the actual divide, which is rich and poor.
right.
Always.
Well,
like always. Right. The news has been fake since, as we see someone in the comments here, Bitcoin will finally end World War I. Indeed. Since then. Right. Since then.
Agreed. No, I'm curious. Like, I spent a lot of time like going down this specific rabbit hole over this past weekend of, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity as a whole are all three of those religions make up well over 50% of the global population. And all 3 of them point to like this area, Jerusalem in particular, but like this area, this stretch of the world is like their birthplace, their religion's birthplace. I don't know. And I'm more curious your perspective of like, we don't think it's a little almost too convenient of a coincidence.
If you think history is fake, if you think news is fake,
yes, okay, cool. We're on the same page.
Is like way worse. Worse.
I saw that.
Unfortunately, so I don't know. I mean, who knows?
What's the take? Isn't it strange how the good guys always win?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh my God. History is always written about the good guys. That's so convenient for us. Like, they always did the right thing, right?
Yeah.
That was my big takeaway from, spoiler alert, the last episode of what's it called? Oh my God. The Dragon Show on HBO. Why can't I think of
Game of Thrones?
Yes.
Yeah.
Game of Thrones, where like Daenerys, like all of a sudden becomes this like crazy evil person. And the whole point is like, right, because she wrote her own history the whole time you're following her. So like every time she freed a group, she was telling her story. So it looked really good, i.e. the perspective of the winner always. I did tell that to the creators of Game of Thrones. They were like, we didn't intend to do that, but we're going to steal that to make it sound a lot better. So,
but residuals coming to Q.
Did you see this video over the weekend of like, if you look up what language did Jesus Christ speak, and then if you look up in that language, what is the word for God in that language, and it's spelled Eloi, E-L-A-I-H, which is very similar to Allah. In fact, when you pronounce it, Eloi, Allah, very similar. Goes even a step further in Farsi, Persian language. Eloi is another term that is endearing towards God. So it is literally a God word. You're fucking telling me Jesus Christ, who is a Jew who founded Christianity and called God Elohi, you're telling me the Muslims and the Jews and the Christians aren't the fucking same?
Yeah, I mean, look, we just there isn't any way to even decipher it anymore. I don't think. I think it's going to go back to. I think it's going to go back to being a. All the way back to the pyramids and Egypt. I mean, we just don't know, right? And I think a lot of what when they call it revelations and eschatology, right? What they're talking about is actually the end of time, but time is money, right? And there's another way to interpret all of that end of the world talk to being very much in line with what we all talk about every day in Bitcoin. You know, time being money, the end of time doesn't have to look the way catastrophists might think. It could just be that you get the actual secrets to all of this stuff, or at least a more fulfilling narrative as you get closer to this object, which I feel like we're getting to, right?
And we'll approach new kind of emergent civilizations and smaller, probably more localized societies as this globalist thing falls apart. But I don't know, look, the world has a long and proud history of not ending. Like, I'm not, bro, you gotta opt out of these doomer narratives.
Yeah,
They're not productive.
Look at the good news. Look what the Israel-Hamas thing has done already. It's completely discredited American colleges and universities, right? I did my show this morning on that, where you get, you know, the high schools. You know, God Sad had a really great joke about it. Like, you know, we, you know, of course, no Jewish kid would feel intimidated by kids running around the school. Why would they be afraid of that, right? But if a 6'4" man with a cock comes into their woman's bathroom, and of course they're not allowed to be afraid, right? That's normal. So, and then you had that professor yesterday in Columbia saying, like, we can't keep your kids safe. Bitcoiners have known this for a while. We've been, you know, our business is literally exploiting the delta between education and Bitcoin and their inability to keep up, even as a multi-billion-dollar business with all of that funding from tuition. They can't even touch us. Like, it's a different planet. And so we've been banking on education being an event-based commercial activity for a while, and I think that our bet is correct, and Bitcoin meetup culture is going to continue to be the more important educational platform, and universities are cooked. You know,
I mean, we're still in like parabolic price discovery mode for that market too. It seems like there's a new meetup event conference every day of the week. I mean, we're just going to be 365 nomadic schooling for people that can afford it.
Yeah. So there's the destruction phase looks tough. It takes a little while. It's a little scary. The creative phase we're really good at, and we're already starting that. So there's no doomerism needed when you spend 15 split seconds understanding that Bitcoiners are actually thinking of citadel building. You know, my farm in Vermont, for example, like commercially, I want to be able to offer it for just like people like me that can't, you know, Canada's not safe for business. So I can't really spend more than 100 and whatever days there because of the psychotic people running the place. And because I am bin Laden in Canada, or was bin Laden in Canada when the truckers thing happened, you know, it makes sense for me to just live on the border and go take advantage of all of the stupid Canadian stuff that I like, right? You know, so my place can be a total citadel for Canadians, and there's people thinking about these types of commercial things more and more.
Definitely. I mean, that's almost all we talk about every morning before the show. And it's like, it's crazy how when you have money with real economic feedback loop, you have a closed system like Bitcoin, it actually incentivizes collaboration among people. I mean, I find myself seeking out community more than I ever have in my life, and working to build new things with new people because of it, because we have this sort of God power of sovereign spending. It's great.
Yeah. And I mean, people complain all the time about loneliness, and I think it is one of the biggest problems in the world, for real. Like, I'm not thinking they're babies or whiny and all that. But what I do say is, well, as a Bitcoiner, I'm on my phone and all that as much. So I'm not sure if it's the phone or you're doing it wrong, but I'm not that lonely. I get together with my friends here and there around the world a year a few times, but I'm not like out there feeling like my social life is dipped or anything, you know?
I don't want to speak on behalf of like a lot of people out there who I definitely, you know, have a vision in my head of who you're talking about. But it's like, I think that people, like you said, people are running away from something as much as they're running toward it. I don't know what people are running toward, not if they don't have Bitcoin, but in general, like what are the masses running toward? What do Americans want? What do people in other part of the world want other than, is my mic plugged in? It might
Yeah.
not be. Does
No,
it
it's
sound
perfect.
bad?
I hear it perfect. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I
Sorry.
don't know why it
Sorry.
sounds like you're talking through your
Well,
laptop.
Oh yeah, no, it's not. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, cool.
so that's why I'm
Way to go,
writing
Tino.
that running towards. I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's why I'm writing the Bitcoiner's Guide to NPC Management, and it's all about like a survival guide and handbook for Bitcoiners to sort of increase their quality of life and their freedom of speech, or when surrounded by non-playable characters. And one of my sort of spells that you can conjure upon an NPC to redirect them and maybe electrify them into awareness and awakening is just to get them to describe the future. Like, what are you actually going for? And you'll see that there's usually a blank slate there. Usually that's something that they've never even acknowledged they don't have. So when you ask them that question, because my book is not about an argument. Like, it's not arguments to give NPC people. There's no argument. It's not like, say this to an NPC and then they'll be orange pilled. It's more like, well, if you recognize these types of NPCs, you can sort of guess at their wants and fears, and you can say certain things and cast certain spells on them that might produce an awakening that would lead them on a road to understand what Bitcoin offers. But one of the ones I use, I think your mic is still off. One of the ones I do use is specifically that is I, get certain people to just describe the future, and when they can't, they're like, oh, and then you can just fill the vacuum with Bitcoin stuff, and they'll go, oh, no, you're still out.
So, Nolan, I want to get a sense from you as we sort of see the plays being drawn out. And I saw a comment earlier too of like the simulation is becoming more and more apparent to people like us. But I still don't buy this idea. Or that's a poor way of phrasing it, but I'm gonna commit to it. I don't buy the idea that we're gonna I don't buy the idea that the government is just going to be like, you know what, we fucked up the dollar. We're just gonna reset and we're not gonna control it. Like, walk me through just your
It's actually easy.
rationale.
What you're thinking of as the government is the federal government of the United States of America, which is a construct of the world wars.
Right.
Fiat it's why I say Satoshi invented money. Fiat is really a combination of the following technologies: of aircraft carriers, oil, printing press, broadcast towers. That's the Fiat psychological operations part. And then everything else they used to win World War II, which was a bureaucracy, which is the mobilization of government, the things we all know, right? And we just basically never shut it off. We let it keep running. We let everything run from World War II. We've never shut any of it off. We've never even thought about shutting it off, it looks like. So you can actually break the language down to its simplest form, because that concept of American government, what it is and how it's used in a sentence, has changed from one major American military altercation to the next along the fourth turning framework. So you can go right from the Revolutionary War, before the time of Revolutionary War, to the Civil War. You would say the following: the United States are, right? The United States are, because the different states were states. After the Civil War, you started to say the United States is, right? And that continued all the way up until Second World War, where it became the Fed is, right? You didn't even think about the United States anymore. You only thought about this other construct. Now, that thing isn't actually enshrined in any law. It's just like a weed that grew, and you can prune it with one Donald Trump would be enough, right? One Donald Trump, who is currently facing capital punishment charges for, I don't know, I forget which one, the boxes hoax or one of the other hoaxes. You're going to get a guy like that, right? Who is standing there with a guy like Kennedy, Kennedy running now on reparations. So that's the end of the Democrat Party. Kennedy actually is deciding who the president of the United States is. Whatever his decision is to stay in the race or get out of the race is literally. So only one person is deciding.
I want your take though. Okay, so
there's only one person deciding the next president, right? And it's Robert F. Kennedy. He decides. If he can't win outright, he decides who the president is. Because if he drops in or out, whatever combination of Newsom or Trump is benefits the way he wants.
So walk me through. If he drops out, who do you think wins as a result? And if he stays in, who do you think wins as a result?
Well, I mean, it looks like it's clear he will never. No one takes any votes from Trump. Anyone who I just can't say it with pure conviction, because I don't really know. But in my impression, is the 40 whatever something percent of Americans who love Donald Trump love Donald Trump, and love is not the same as I like their opinions or something like that, right? They don't give a shit what Trump does. It's Trump for king for these people, right? It's Trump for king.
We don't have a problem with that.
No, I don't care. Kings, they're way better than this stupid thing we have in America. What is this republic? Either way, it's kings.
I don't
Either
like
way,
kings.
if it's Kennedy, you got a king, right? Because that's royalty. If it's Kennedy, you got a king. And if it's
Biden,
Trump,
you got a king.
The republic is over, dude. That's done. It's done, right? Don't be sentimental about it.
I guess.
When they say it's Rome, all these Rome things, right? Remember what happens. It is the end of the republic part. If America does have these analogies to Rome, Rome's best time was when it had its emperor and kings and all these Caesars, right? We're in the Caesar time now, man. Things are different. We destroyed. Now, I think that the local governments are going to grow up in the meantime, right? But Trump goes in, and if the deal is, Kennedy decides. So what your question was, which scenario, whatever it is, he decides, right? So I think no matter what, he can make Trump president, which I think he's going to do. And the deal for him is he gets his daddy's old job, which is the attorney general. And that's the only way you can actually drop criminals from space and do a Nuremberg 2, is if you have a bipartisan space dropping committee of royalty, like Kennedy, saying, Fauci, you're going to take a ride up in one of Elon's rockets, and there's going to be amazing betting markets on where you land, but Tom Cruise is going to host after what the pharmaceutical industry did to Tom Cruise. So he's going to do the Mission Impossible Halo jump hosting. Today, we've got Fauci, who's going to take a ride in a rocket, and that's what's going to happen. So the states are going to have to make up the difference, which I think they will. And I think you're going to get a whole new deal between the United States themselves and the federal government. You're going to get a whole new type of federal government, a whole new job of president. The job of president is made up. There's no job. It hasn't always been practiced the same way. The old presidents were chill. I think you're going back to chill type royalty, and that's cool. I would rather that, right? Tell some jokes. If Trump's the president, then you finally have a comedian and a TV star as president, which who doesn't want that now after all this stuff?
I mean, to be honest with you, comedy was the best when Trump was in office. Because the jokes you could crack were just gold.
Even his thing on all this trouble in Israel and Gaza, his answer, Netanyahu's not perfect. Come on.
But the thing is,
come on.
I still fall into the camp of I don't support the war in Ukraine. I think it's a stupid proxy war, and it's the most textbook military-industrial complex playbook we've seen. That said, though, I do think Putin is one of these people, much like Netanyahu, in my opinion, quite frankly, and to a degree. Does it work this time?
Let's see.
Yeah, there we go. No, it sounds much better.
Okay, good. My bad, guys.
But I guess maybe society and civilization is just getting what it deserves when you have leaders like Putin and Netanyahu and Trump, for that matter, who are potentially just going to become kings and rule for.
What's wrong with kings? honestly.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with a good king. And I know the word
Prince
good is
Philip,
subjective.
hanging out with him in Amsterdam last week, like, what a gentleman,
Yeah.
just the best. Like, such a
Yeah.
cool guy, such a nice fella. What would you rather
It's also
study?
it's the most efficient form of governance. And I don't know about
Yeah.
you guys, but trusting democracy to sort anything out. These representative democracies, first of all, they don't represent the people. But even if they did, you wouldn't want that world.
Right.
You wouldn't, we haven't had
I mean,
a true representative democracy in years.
So
I would say like JFK, that was a king. That was a monarch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he comes from a royal family of American lineage, no doubt. I go back to, for example, being an Iranian. So I'm just going to use two Iranian kings as an example. Like Cyrus the Great is someone that our founding fathers looked up to, admired, and used many of what he implemented in the ancient Persian Empire into the Declaration of Independence and into modern society. In fact, the emblem of the post office, that little like eagle bird, comes from the Persian Empire. Like that's how much influence the ancient Persian Empire actually had on our founding fathers. But I even go further back to the very first king of Persia. I can never pronounce his name properly, but it's Deioces, Deioces. He was considered the first king of Iran in like 11,000 BC. And like his story was he was in essence the only considered fair judge in all these scattered tribes. Had so many people come and visit him and ask him for rulings, and they would all leave satisfied. But one day he just woke up and was like, dude, I don't want to do this anymore. Disappeared off the face of the fucking earth. No one could find him. All of the tribes, all of a sudden, they start infighting again. It's just wars. Tribal leaders get together. We can't do this anymore. We need a leader. We need a good king who would be a fair and just ruler. And they go back to this guy. They're like, what about that judge from like 10 years ago who disappeared? If we find him and ask him to be king, and sure enough, find him, accepts, and so begins the reign of the Persian Empire and the Assyrians.
Hey, I hate to interrupt here, but did you guys notice we're at 29.5 here? The Bitcoin price.
I need to go down, go back to 25.
Yeah, I've been all crossed up this year. It's been terrible.
Yeah, loving it. Well, that's interesting. If we cross over 30 here soon, that's kind of a psychological hurdle for the community.
I thought we crossed 30 earlier this morning.
That was a couple days ago for 10. Oh, did we? This is the first I've looked at price today. Maybe we did. I have no idea.
I haven't seen.
Get my Ellen Markets notifications going off right now. All right. So to wrap it, do we have any questions that are related we can knock this out with? Nolan, what's your definition of what's your definition of money laundering? This is kind of a important one we've been discussing before.
Going back to your
or what is it? Like, explain how the psyop of money laundering and how it's an ever expanding, range of powers that the state applies to people.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling is that it only existed as a concept at the time when information laundering became equally important. So it goes back to Kennedy. It goes back to the assassination, and the very concept of money laundering before that didn't really, I guess tax disclosures maybe were the reason why you'd want to launder money so that you could pay taxes on it, I guess was originally the logic, right? So that you didn't have to, I guess, worry about a bank telling on you. So it all comes down to the deputization of banks, as far as I can tell. And that comes down to the state not being able to actually do police work, and right back to the gangsters of the 1920s and Prohibition. The police not willing to do police work because it was dangerous, and so it is. And so instead of doing police work, you deputize pencil pushing bureaucrats because it made sense at the time. It was a weak point in the infrastructure. They call them geniuses for figuring this out. Now, it might have actually worked for criminals in the Al Capone time, but it was very quickly turned into political dissonance. And we see that because the Bank Secrecy Act goes back to 1964, which is conveniently right after Kennedy is assassinated. And so it's at that point where you even get into the infrastructure of FISA, not FISA, but FATF. All this stuff comes about after the assassination of John F. Kennedy, right at the time the Vietnam War is starting, where the same fiat brainwashers that we've been talking about this whole show were questioning, or at least worried about, why there was anti-war sentiment, and as well as people talking about Kennedy and the assassination. So immediately they went into the banking system and they created SWIFT. SWIFT comes from that era too, right? Putting notes with the money so that there was...
Which decade does SWIFT come from?
60s, yeah, 64 to 65. SWIFT comes fully operational, I think, by 67, 68 time period, but it's in relation again to the Kennedy assassination. So all of this money laundering as a concept, it doesn't exist before that. Before that, money laundering is just trading money. It's just transactions.
But it's crazy, the incentives to keep us on this 60, 70-year-old infrastructure. This is still the way money's sent today, over an actual wire that takes days to settle. If
primordial
not
to the system. It's primordial to the system. It can't survive without it.
Right.
If this was gone, you would actually have what it looks like they're already worried about in America with these foreign countries not participating in U.S. bond buying. It would be way worse.
You'd have sovereign nations that don't have that aren't under the thumb of this state.
Yeah, and now, like, luckily, America just sanctions so many people that they figured it out. So this whole infrastructure is garbage. That's why, like, for programming these days, we've mentioned it a few times, and I continue to insist on it. I don't want any more. It used to be there was room for KYC apologists and people like that, right? Like that was kind of like, oh, you have an idea of how to integrate KYC for now. That stuff's over. Now it's just people who want to say it as it is. This is a crime and should not be perpetuated. And Bitcoin companies that go out of their way to avoid any form of KYC should always be given priority, because that's the real story.
This is the real problem, though. I mean, the silence from the OGs that have been here 10 plus years that aren't advocating for KYC free and coin joining the silence is kind of deafening there.
They got used to it. They got used to living with the compromise. But this next pump will show us that there's another avenue, because you're going to get, look at what's happening in Argentina, right? Milei is probably going to win next week. That's the end of income tax over there. That's going to be a whole different scenario. And you're going to see a brain drain. You're going to see people running away and Americans running away. And this appetite, remember what Obama did in 2008? That's where your whole global taxation comes from, right? Before that, Americans could just not be in America. Before the last financial crisis, they could leave America and not pay taxes like any other human being on the planet, right? You leave your country for the majority of the time, you don't have to pay taxes anymore. Americans used to be able to benefit from that, but that changed in the financial crisis last time. They're going to go after American taxpayers again in the next, crush of America, pump of Bitcoin. And so we're going to be hunted. Bitcoiners will be hunted. And all the places we can run to are going to be important. So it's going to become obvious. And the places that don't make you put a fucking email with your transactions are going to be benefiting. Argentina will be one. And Argentina is going to enjoy a renaissance, and it's going to be stakes galore.
Yeah. You think of all the surrounding areas too. I mean, we look at how well Bitcoin solves the problems of people that are selling goods and services at a market peer-to-peer, for example, in Costa Rica. I mean, I've seen it. These people are actually using Bitcoin. It's not the top-down El Salvador. These are emergent communities that are using Bitcoin for goods and services. It's crazy.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, should we wrap up here, guys? We're about 10 minutes over. We'll be back. I don't know when we'll be back live. I'm headed to Japan here, but we're going to release some videos next week for sure. So stay tuned. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Follow us, on Rumble, YouTube. Definitely zap that stream. Shout out to all those users. And thanks for your great questions today.
Thank you, Nolan, for joining us.